you know, uh, everything was, uh, I guess I was kind of getting tired of it. Like everything was kind of a chore too. And so I would allow things to creep in. I would negotiate. It's like, well, I don't have to order all my sushi vegan. I could probably have a little
Uh-huh.
fish. Fish isn't that bad for you,
Uh-huh.
and
So it's like
uh,
that slippery slope when you've
I,
run far away enough from the bad thing and you're like catching
I,
your breath and you're like, well, we can
yep,
walk a little bit now.
that's it. I was coasting. I was feeling pretty satisfied. That was and that felt dangerous to me. At that point, I think I'd lost a total of 65 pounds at that point, and people are high fiving you, man. They love that
Hmm.
that because you're average. I was at an and I also remember people were starting to uh, give me cautionary tales. It's like, well, don't take this too far now. You're good, right?
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, no, I think there's something else out there. I'd like to be able to run a little faster. I'd like to be able to lose a little more weight, whatever. And, I remember mentioning to my father-in-law that I thought I had 200 pounds in sight. I think I was at 220 at that point, which would have been considered an ideal weight.
Right.
And,
And how tall are you?
I, 6'2".
Uh-huh. Okay.
So 220 would have been at the high end of the BMI, right? So, uh, but I thought, really, I picked 220 as a goal weight because it was the only number I could remember associating where I was of a healthy shape and size. So I thought, okay, 220 is it. It seemed realistic. Didn't seem too daunting. When I got to 220, I was still like, well, there's this little flab around my middle here. I've still got a
Uh-huh.
little chin under here. Like, I think there's more to go. And I just posed the number like, man, 200 would be nice. Like, I haven't seen that since high school. That would be
Hmm.
great.
Gotcha.
And that's when people were like, okay, now you have an eating disorder. Now you've taken this too far. Have a piece of cake for God's sakes. What's wrong with you? Live a little. You did it already. Stop. You know. And I'm like, no, I don't think I'm done. And at that moment, you know, was when I met Josh, and that was, such an inspiring figure at that time. And had just been on the cover of Runner's World, and I'd been following him extensively, and he's done the Rich Roll show 2 times at that point, I think, or maybe 3, and all of these things. I was just really connected with that. I was following on social media, following his trajectory, seeing,
Mhm.
you know,
So
looking at his stuff.
you were like in New Orleans on business?
Yeah, I was just there for a conference, and really just DM'd him for I'm like, hey, any plant-based restaurants you'd recommend? And he literally was like, I'm eating here tonight. Why don't you meet me and join me? And I was like, eek! total total fanboy moment.
Right.
That I and I actually had the copy of Runner's World with him on the cover in my briefcase, so I like grabbed that. I was going to make him autograph it because I'm about to meet the Josh LaJaunie,
Right.
and yeah, I excitedly went to dinner, and there he was sitting in the restaurant, and it was like this larger than life moment that quickly became the most comfortable conversation I'd had. Like you and I are talking right now. I mean, we just talked for hours about everything and anything, and it was fantastic. And but really, at that point too, I really felt like I was kind of calling myself out that I'd gotten a little soft,
Uh-huh.
and especially watching him, the meal we had in the restaurant we were in, and the options he was choosing, and I was like, man, if I was here by myself, I'd be getting the special tonight, and with whatever the cashew cream sauce on it and everything else, and he's like modifying every dish and making sure that everything is perfect, and so I was watching that, going, yeah, I can tighten up a little bit, I can do more, um,
Right.
and
And
obviously on our run the next day that showed me I could do a whole lot more.
yeah, tell that story because I've told the story about when I first ran with Josh when he
uh,
came up here to work on it. It was just like, yep, this is what happened to me too.
it was a humbling experience for sure, and I was already nervous. I mean, I I was following his Strava, so I knew the guy was legit fast. I knew that he was, an ultra distance runner and that I was not. But, I also knew that he was in the middle of a 20 miler and he was going to pick me up halfway through. So I felt confident that, well, at least he'll be, 10 miles in before he grabs me.
And you were going to run 10 with him?
No, well, we were going to run an indeterminate amount
Okay.
because I told him that, I'm like, I know I'm good for 6. I don't know if I've got, anything more than that. And so I think in his mind, he was thinking we'd see how much past 6 we could go, but not, he wasn't going to do a 6 mile out and back or anything with me. And obviously, he is the mayor of New Orleans when it comes to being able to give like a historic run tour of the city. And so it was really fascinating. And we were talking the entire time as well. But he was definitely waiting for me the whole time. He'd be running along, talking, and look back over his shoulder, and I'm 10 feet behind him, struggling to catch up. So he'd slow down, jog in place for a little while, kind of pulling me along. Or I'd be catching up to him at intersections and, or praying for the light to turn red before we got to the corner. I remember doing that quite a few times, like, please be red. Please be red.
Yeah. I remember trying to catch up with him, and then like he's standing there waiting for me, and I'm like pissed at him, like, how come he gets to rest and I don't?
Right. I know it's not helping when you take off as soon as I catch up to you. Can we stand here and talk for a minute?
So
yeah.
Aside from, from that experience, like what like I've written, in Sick to Fit and told the story many times, like those 2 runs that he did with me changed everything.
Absolutely. And that did change everything for me. I saw what the potential was, and I felt like I had, now he was a real individual. He was as real as they came before, but he was somebody I followed on social media. So now that, he's standing right there in front of me and that I see how tall he is and how, running right beside him and see how effortless it is. And that, it validated anything. If there was any doubt that, well, yeah, he posted up that run, but yeah, I don't know, what was that, all downhill or something, or, and then you realize it's like, okay, all of that is 100% true. And I've got a lot of work to do, but it was inspiring. It wasn't defeating. It was really inspiring because, I hadn't even lost 100 pounds at that point. I'd lost 65 pounds. He'd lost all of me at that point. He'd lost more than me in weight. So that made me feel like that I was really close, that instead of having a long way to go, it felt like I was close, that I was just on. And that's really all I needed too, was that added bit of inspiration